You're listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and John Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.
Welcome to the Mammal Watching podcast with me, John Hall in New York.
And me, Charles Foley in Minneapolis.
Before we get any further, because I know the world is waiting, we had a competition 2 weeks ago with a mystery noise, and we are going to unveil the answer to that and the circumstances in which it was recorded by the person who did the recording.
Yes, and before we do that, here is another short clip of the mammal sound.
What sort of guesses have we had, Charles?
Well, we've pretty much covered the spectrum. So we've had Anguantibo, we've had giraffe, we've had various species of antelope. What else?
We've had tree hyrax, pygmy hippo, rhino, giant forest hog, wild boar, and someone suggested it was me snoring. Which is uncannily echoes.
Yes. So on the line today, we have the person who actually made the recording, and he will tell us what it is. So can you introduce yourself and tell us where you are calling from?
Sure, I'm Howard Frederick. I'm a conservation biologist. I'm based in Iringa in southern Tanzania.
Okay, well, welcome, Howard.
Welcome.
I've known Howard for many, many, many years in Tanzania. And Howard, could you tell the audience what this mystery species was?
All right, well, the big reveal is that this is hippopotamus in the Luangwa River in eastern Zambia.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? And I have to admit, several people got it correct. There was Richard and Jules Knocker from Tanzania. They got it, as did Ethan Kinsey, and both of those are professional safari guides. But also Vladimir Dinets guessed it, and my 3-year-old niece, Junie, got it, which kind of rubs our faces in it a little bit. I suspect she got it because she and I mostly communicate to each other in animal noises. But still, I was very impressed. John, was there anyone else who got it?
No, I certainly didn't get it. I mean, once I knew the answer, I listened to it again, and I could hear the hippo component, but that kind of trombone noise over the top completely threw me. I would really encourage you now to share your hippopotamus impression with the world.
Okay, so, well, all right. So the hippo noise that I'm used to, and most people will have heard, is the standard, right? I mean, that is your classic hippo. And I had never heard anything like this before. And so, Howard, you said that you recorded this in Zambia, is that right?
Yeah, so it's along the Luangwa River, down in South Luangwa National Park. And I went to bed in this camp and woke up with this sound and just sat there thinking, what on earth is that? And it wasn't for several minutes until there was a classic sort of hippo noise in the middle of it. But up until that point, I was flummoxed. I had no idea, because it sounds like whales.
It really
sounds
does.
like any number of other things.
Yeah. And you've camped by rivers in Africa with hippos for many, many times. How often have you actually heard this sound?
So this was really unusual. I'd only ever heard it, I think this is my 15th year in Africa when I first heard this noise, and maybe a bit less than that. And I remember thinking that I've never heard this before. I've been in Zaire and Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, parts of West Africa, lots of places in Tanzania, and never come across this sound. And so it was completely, completely unique in my experience. The only other place I've come across it is in Sand River's camp in Sulu in Tanzania. And both of those places have kind of interesting circumstances where this was happening. I'm wondering if that's part of the reason why it's happening. And in Zambia, what was interesting to me is that I heard this noise and I was stunned. Everybody else said, well, that's just the noise that hippos make. And I said, no, it bloody well isn't. That's incredible. I've never heard this before. And as far as they were concerned, in the dry season along the Luangwa, that is a completely typical hippo noise. And they sit there, and I said, well, they're singing. And they said, yeah, hippos sing during the dry season. And when I first heard this, it was all night, pretty much for a week and a half that I was there.
One of the very few people who actually really got this right and seemed to know what it was were Richard and Jules Knocker, and they work for Maps Edge Safari Company, and they have actually spent a reasonable amount of time in the Selous, so perhaps that is why they were more familiar with this than others. And they said that it's two male hippos in a territorial dispute.
I think I actually played this recording for the managers at Sand River at the time. Because I heard the sound off in the distance, and I said, "Oh, listen to this," and they said, "Yeah, that's a hippo noise," and it's in the dry season. And many of my aerial surveys that I go and do these trips for take place during the dry season, and there's not much around for animals to eat. And it seems like the hippopods are staying in the river. They're staying in one place and not walking around at night looking for food, and they're staying there. And there's some kind of interaction happening. And that's where these noises come from. And in Sand Rivers as well, they thought it was mating. Actually, they said it was a mating call or some sort of aggressive interaction around mating. And in Luangwa, everybody seemed to think it was just the noise they make. Don't ask too many questions, sort of thing.
Right.
But nobody really had. And so I definitely. So the first time that I encountered this in Luangwa, southern part of the river, I was there for many, many evenings watching for evidence of something happening. And it was very, very quiet. There was really nothing else happening. No animals charging around. And usually when hippos are being aggressive with each other, there's a huge amount of splashing. And I think Dick Estes said in his book, aggressive bubbling, which was one of my favorite behavioral tricks I've ever read about, aggressively bubbling at each other. And the first time I heard this, there was nothing going on. It was just this incredible sort of whale song off in the distance and occasionally quite close by. The second time I heard it in Luangwa, and I tried to get a recording a couple of years ago, was up near the Mfoe headquarters. And there was definitely a bit of chasing or some sort of activity associated with it. But I couldn't really see what was going on, but there was definitely a bit of one male chasing the other around, possibly male and a female, to be honest, I'm not sure. But one of the guides who was there thought it was two males as well. Mm-hmm. And then in Sand Rivers, they were too far away to be able to see what was actually happening.
Right.
And was this at night only?
Only at night. And it didn't begin until quite late as well. Like the sun had been down for a couple of hours at least. But then it goes on until 5 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Well, I haven't seen anything written up about this, and it may be that I've just missed it. But perhaps an avenue of research for someone.
Yeah, perhaps. And I'm really curious to know the range of people who identified it, where they'd experienced it, because those are definitely the only two places I've encountered it. And I've played the tape for quite a few very experienced safari guides. All of them have the same reaction that I did and you guys did when you first heard it. What on earth is that? And in parts of along the Luangwa, everybody instantly knows what it is and doesn't even question that the hippos wouldn't do that kind of thing. But it's a very, very localized bit of knowledge, but a lot of other people have no idea.
Yeah. Fascinating, hey? Wow.
Yeah.
So, Howard, thank you so much for providing this mammal quiz for us and for taking the time to come on to the podcast and tell us what it was.
Yeah, that was fascinating. Thank you so much. And well done for everyone who guessed, and thanks for people taking the time to guess as well. And we have Vladimir Dinets is our guest today, and he was one of the few people who guessed this correctly. But we interviewed him before he won this competition. So you know, he obviously will want to include this now prominently on his CV, and it wasn't mentioned in my introduction. Explain why. Well done, Vladimir.
Thanks very much, guys. It's a real pleasure joining you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we're very pleased today to have Vladimir Dinets with us, who many of you will know from the website. He's one of the most active people on the community forum. He's posted a ton of trip reports. He's traveled a great deal. He's seen a huge number of mammals. Vladimir is also a well-known author. He's written books on where to find mammals. Many of you will have his guide for North America. He's also written about his work with crocodiles, with his book Dragon Songs. He's got a PhD in zoology, and he's just telling us he's now a statistics professor too, to fill in the time. Welcome to the podcast, Vladimir.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, Vladimir.
It's great to have you for sure. So can you start by telling us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I was born in Moscow, Russia, and it's a very big city, as most of you know. So pretty much within the first couple of years, I realized that it was not my natural habitat, and I spent most of my life trying to get out of cities as much as possible. It's still an ongoing struggle because, you know, there are job issues, schools for kids and so on. But I'm still hopeful that someday I will live in some remote place in the Andes.
And you're talking from New Jersey at the moment, I should have mentioned.
Yeah, I'm talking from suburban New Jersey.
You do have a yard that's full of mammals because you keep posting pictures of woodland voles and
That's
deer
right.
and things on Facebook. It's not bad it's a lot better than my yard.
Yeah, well, I will pretty soon know all of them by name. So,
And so, Vladimir, how did you actually become interested in mammal watching? At what age did that happen for you?
well, I was interested in biology pretty much forever. Like when I was 4, I read some books by Durrell, and I already knew what I wanted to do with my life. And then when I was 6, my grandmother, with huge difficulty, procured the copies of the only field guides that were available in the Soviet Union. There was just one for birds and one for mammals, and they were almost impossible to buy. But she got them, and I started marking the species that I've seen, and that's how it started.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea someone else was doing the same thing.
Right. And your father was a butterfly collector, is that right? So you kind of grew up in a family where looking for animals was...
No, not
I'm
at all.
wrong.
Well, my parents got divorced just before I was born, and I met my father when I was 12.
Right.
And he was a very serious butterfly collector and researcher. He described a few texts and so on.
Yeah.
And so would, when you were growing up, would you then go into the outskirts of Moscow to look for animals? Or when were your first trips that you actually took specifically to try to find animals?
Well, when I was really little, we spent summers in the country, and it was really great. And I think my mom started to allow me to travel by myself when I was about 12, I think, or 10. And because, you see, all crime statistics were secret, so people thought that the place was perfectly safe. So I could just take a train and travel anywhere.
And how long were you living in Russia for? Because you left, well, actually, I'm not sure when you left. When did you leave Russia?
I think I was 28 when I left. And I did a few practice runs to different places, and then I finally moved to the United States.
Right. Okay. Are you an American citizen now, or
Yeah.
you are? Okay. Right.
And I know I only ever talked to you really about mammals, but I know you're also a birder, you're a herper, you're interested in insects, plants. You're always putting up photographs of all sorts of things you've identified. So you're really interested in everything, as far as I can tell. But are mammals your favorite part of the wildlife world?
I'm trying not to play favorites, but what happened with mammals is now I have access to all kinds of exciting technologies that I never had before. It's not just the thermal scopes, it's also mist nets and light recorders and good camera and good flashlights. So it keeps becoming new and new experience every time something new is invented, which is why I enjoy looking for mammals so much.
Right.
One of the reasons, yeah.
And I saw about a month ago or so, you posted some of your wildlife lists on Facebook, and you've seen about 90% of the world's bird species, which sort of puts you into this elite birding category. And obviously, you've seen huge numbers of mammal species as well.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you allocate your time when you go on a trip? Are you mostly looking for mammals and spend some time looking for birds? Do you do it 50-50? How do you do it?
Oh, well, if it's a tropical country, I sleep around noon, and then for a couple hours after midnight. And that way I can get mammals at night and birds in the morning.
So you sleep at noon and then for a couple of hours and then a couple of hours at midnight?
Yeah.
Okay, uh-huh.
So birds and mammals are mostly at different times, and nocturnal birds require the same things to find them as mammals, so there's no contradiction.
Right, right.
But reptiles are much more difficult to combine with mammals, because if you're using thermal scope, you don't see reptiles, so usually the only way you find them is by stepping on them.
Right, okay. And are you as well known on the birding forums as you are on the mammal watching forums?
No, I find bird watching to be a bit overcrowded, so I'm not very socially active there.
Right.
I mean, there's no point publishing trip reports because everything's been published 10 times already.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible that there are birders who, they will dedicate trips like full time. They won't even sort of turn their head if a tiger walks past. And they've done that for their lives, and they've got, you've also got the mammal list with the bird list. It's just remarkable, and I'm sure lack of sleep goes a long way towards helping towards that. So, how much do you like? I know I've taken trips with you, and your plans have been, we'll sleep from like 4 a.m. to 4:15 a.m. and then keep going. And I've always thought, oh no, it's not going to work for me. If you're on your own and you don't have to worry about mortals who need to sleep, how many hours of sleep a day would you get when you're on a trip?
It depends on the length of the trip and lots of stuff. But usually, and of course, if I have to drive, I have to sleep more. But I think my personal record was the trip to West Sahara and Morocco. It was something like 10 days, and I think I slept 24 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, wow.
But that was really difficult because I also had to drive all the time.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And have you always needed very little sleep, even as you were a kid, or was that something that you taught yourself as you got older?
The funny thing, it only works during trips. I have 2 small kids now, and I totally suffer from lack of sleep.
Okay, you're Achilles heel.
Even though I usually get at least 6 hours.
Vladimir, one of the things that John mentioned earlier is that you have contributed a huge number of reports to John's website, mammalwatching.com. And one of the features of your reports is that you typically see a lot of the smaller mammals, the rodents and the bats. And I was wondering if you could explain to us how you tend to find and identify these animals, and if you have any tips for mammal watchers on what sort of methods they can use to look for and find smaller creatures.
Oh, well, I've been doing it for almost 50 years now, and there's a lot of stuff that you cannot learn unless you learn it like the traditional Asian way by decades of practice. So you become really attuned to like small movements and small sounds, and you can tell a mouse from a lizard by the sound it makes and so on. So yeah, you have to practice a lot. You have to know biology. You have to know what to look for, the signs, the shelters, this kind of thing. You have to know local fauna in advance, which is why I always make, when I go to a new country, I always make a little checklist with all the identification things to look at, because you have to know what to look at before you see the animal. That's the way to identify it. There are some exceptions like horseshoe-nosed bats. Of course, the only way to photograph them is to take a photo and then look at the nose up close, because those nose leaves, you cannot even describe them in a checklist. but generally you have to know what features to look for. And it should be very easy trip, at least the part of the trip when you're looking for mammals. If you're hauling a 50-kilo backpack up a mountain, you're not going to see much. So you have to drop that backpack, make a nice comfortable camp or something, and then quietly, very slowly walk around, listen to every tiny noise. It requires a lot of concentration.
So do you typically tend to move and then stop and listen? Do you spend quite a lot of time in one place? How do you typically do it?
I don't do it typically. It depends on the place and what you're looking for. And if you find a really good place, like a crossroad of a bunch of animal trails, it makes sense to sit there. If you're looking for some rare species with low density, like wolverine, sitting in a place wouldn't do much unless it's a roadkill. And of course, it has to be a very small group of people, because if you have more than 2 or 3, people start talking to each other, paying attention to each other, and it never works.
Right. And do you tend to sort of trap much, or not really?
I used to. As for rodents, I don't really trap as much as I used to, because with the thermal scope, you can see them, you can see more and better. But for some species, you still have to use trapping.
Mm-hmm.
One big disappointment with thermal scoping for me was that you almost never see shrews, although there are exceptions. Why not? I still cannot understand, because they should be running around.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was going to talk about shrews, because I think in all of my life, I have seen 3 or 4 shrews alive in the wild that haven't been in traps. Maybe 10, but several of those were in places where there's been an explosion of small mammals. But other than that, I just never see them. I'm going on my own. I used to be on my own all the time, very quiet. And with the thermal scope, it's not any better, as you say. And yet there have been trips where you've seen a ton of shrews, and it's remarkable, your ability to find these things.
Well, I've been lucky to get into explosion places, as you mentioned. The most impressive one was on Niragongo volcano a while ago, where the whole forest was crawling with shrews. And
which place? Sorry, Vladimir, I missed that.
Niragongo in Congo, Zaire.
In Zaire. Okay, right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And yeah, I saw an explosion in Alaska a few years ago. Pretty much all over the state. It went for a whole year. And yeah, in some places you just find a bunch in one night. I had that experience in Cornwall a few years ago.
In Cornwall, in the UK?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was Cornwall or the border of Cornwall, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
And when you were in DRC, did you see the hero shrew?
No.
You didn't? Okay.
And here in New Jersey, I've seen probably 2 or 3 shrews the whole time.
Yeah.
But I went to Moscow last summer, which is biogeographically quite similar. And there were tons of shrews there that you could hear and see in the Central Botanical Garden.
Really? What species are they?
Lesser white-toothed and common red-toothed. Not many species, just 2 of the species that are there had high density, but I don't know why there's such a big difference. But then, northeastern United States generally suck in everything wildlife related.
So yeah, and I mean, I know Venkat said the same thing about identifying small mammals. When you get to know them, it is a lot easier. As you say, you know the features and you can learn all that. But for me, it's even when I've got them in the hand and I think I know the features and I'm looking at textbooks, it can be extremely difficult to separate different mice or different wood rats, for example. I mean, I'm backwards and forwards with everything.
One reason is that so many field guides are not any good. There are some informal features that people working with them look at.
Right.
But for some reason, they're seldom found in field guides. One very good exception is Fiona's book for North America, which has all those informal signs that you can use.
Even those, I find them very subjective. I mean, Fiona's book, I know she's listening, it's a great book. But it's, it has a little tuft of white above the eye, and then you look at something and there's a small tuft of something that's whitish, and is that a tuft of white? Is it just grey? And I go around in circles on that stuff. So,
well, in this case, you just take a photo and send it to Fiona.
that's true.
Yes. And do you, when you go to places, because there are quite a few places, of course, they know field guides at all, do you try to learn as much of the literature before you go to scientific literature? Or,
I usually, if it's a place like Central Africa, I spend a few months doing this. And then still I have to identify some stuff after the trip.
So Vladimir, you've traveled a huge amount. Do you know how many countries you've been to?
Oh, 130 something. I think.
Okay, so it's a lot. And yeah, I know you've had all sorts of adventures, some fairly extreme along the way. Would you like to share one or two of your favorites?
Oh, well, the most pleasant ones were usually when I managed to see an animal that hasn't been seen before, at least by naturalists. And I had that privilege a few times. Or when you see a rare animal more than once and you kind of develop a connection. Or you see it once, but you develop a connection. Like, there is this place in Mexico where you can play with baby gray whales. And there was a tiger that I kept meeting in the same place for over a course of a few years. And I saw it growing from a teenager, so to speak, to a huge male. And that was a lot of fun. But yeah, when I was younger and I didn't have much money, I traveled in ways very different from what I'm doing now. So I had a lot of scary adventures as well. Fortunately, not anymore. So the scariest adventure that ever happened to me was also the first big predatory mammal that I ever saw. And I was 14, and I was traveling by myself in Siberia for the first time. And I needed to walk between two villages. And the local people said, well, there is a bear there that is misbehaving. It killed a few cows and we're really scared of it. So there is this lady that wants you to go with her because she's afraid to go alone. And if you agree to take her, we'll give you a gun. And I said, okay. And it was quite a long distance, so we had to spend the night in a little cabin on the mountain pass. And it was a very dark, rainy night, so we got to this cabin, and the cabin had a little vestibule that for people living there, snow-covered clothes and shoes in winter. And the second door, and then the single room with two bunk beds. And as soon as it got really, really dark and started heavily raining, we heard the bear walking around the cabin. And then the bear started pulling on the logs, trying to take the cabin apart. And then we noticed that usually, when you make a wooden cabin, you make those little cuts in the logs so that they fit together like a puzzle. But this cabin didn't have this. It was just a pile of logs, so to speak. So it was pretty clear that it was going to fall apart pretty soon and the roof would fall on our heads. And this lady, she was maybe 40 or 50. She said, why don't you just do something about it? You're the man, you have the gun.
Yeah.
So I walked into this little vestibule to listen to where the bear was. And she immediately locked the second door behind my back. And she said, I'm sorry, I have kids, I have to take care of myself. And it was pitch, there was no light in this little vestibule. I had just one cartridge in my gun. So then I heard that the bear was sniffing under the door. And then I started shaking the door, and the door was very flimsy, it wouldn't hold long. So I opened the door, and it was absolutely dark outside. And then I kind of saw this silhouette against the sky rising up, and I shot the gun, and in the flash I saw the face of the bear. And I don't know if you've been to a museum where they have a Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton. The bear was maybe 4 or 5 times that size. And I closed the door again, and I didn't see or hear anything else until morning except for mosquitoes. And then in the morning I opened the door and the bear was lying there. So apparently I shot it in the mouth and into the brain. Very lucky shot. That's the end of the story.
Wow. Okay.
So how did the conversation with the lady go after that?
Exactly.
I didn't I just took my gun, which wasn't mine, and left. I didn't wait for her to wake up. I never saw her again.
Okay. And
Fair
you
enough.
walked to the next village.
Yeah.
I might have to try that trick one day. So, sorry, I've got children. I'm going to lock you out over here with a bear. So, what about some of your most special mammal sightings? I mean, you've seen large numbers of really rare species. What are some of the ones that have given you the most pleasure?
Oh, seeing whales underwater is always wonderful. Swimming with whales if you get a chance. One mammal that I always remember was woolly flying squirrel. It's never been seen in the wild by biologists before me. And there were fears that it was almost extinct. So I went on a trip to Afghanistan and Pakistan to look for it. There was 1 year when it was relatively safe to do. And I spent some time looking for it, and I found a place where they lived in a huge granite wall on the side of a canyon. And I was on the top of the canyon, so I could see them like climbing over the edge of the wall and feeding in trees. And then they would glide back into the canyon and make this huge loop over the abyss and land somewhere on the wall where presumably they had caves that they lived in. And all this was happening in such a beautiful place just below the mountain of Nanga Parbat, which is the highest peak in the Western Himalaya, more than 8,000 meters. And this whole moonlit landscape and trees and squirrels and everything, it was so magical.
And how many days did it take you to find them?
In this particular place, just one night. But it took me a lot of effort and time, to more than a month, to find this place. I tried so many different locations.
Right.
And you were on your own doing all this? Was it part of an expedition?
Oh, no, just me.
Wow.
And so how did it feel when you finally saw it and thought, okay, that is really a woolly flying squirrel?
Well, there is a second species, the Kashmir flying squirrel. So I spent some time trying to convince myself that it was a Kashmir flying squirrel, kind of playing devil's advocate, but there was absolutely no way it could be. And then I was just totally ecstatic about it.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, I remember looking at woolly flying squirrel in a book of mammals which were thought to be extinct, and that was when I was at university, and I thought, I wonder, is that species really extinct? And sure enough, you saw it, and then Peter Zala, who was also on the podcast earlier, he also went to the area and also found individuals up over there, etc. So that's great. And
Yeah,
now it's been split into about 3 species, hasn't it?
Yeah, there's 2 more species further east. So it's getting easier and easier.
Right.
Only. Yeah. So when was this? Was this before Peter Zala saw them?
It was after he published his paper where he reported that they're not extinct, and he had pictures of a captive one.
Yeah. Okay.
That I think they found in the market. But before his second trip, when he found more.
He found the cave. Okay. Wow.
And what other species have been highlights for you? I know you took a picture of a black jaguar, I think in Mexico once.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got into a lot of trouble with this one because Mexican zoologists kind of didn't like the fact that an outsider got it. And a few of them published papers saying that there are no black jaguars north of southern Mexico. So they said that it was fake, that it was photographed in a zoo, although it's quite clear from the photo that it's not, that it was photoshopped. I don't remember if there was even Photoshop around at the time, but anyway, later it turned out that there are historical records of black jaguar from southwestern states. Quite a few.
And how did you see it?
Well, I went to this very interesting area. Unfortunately, it's totally off limits now because of the drug cartel activity. It's on the border of Sonora and Sinaloa. And when I started driving there, I realized that I had flu. and it was a really bad case. So I was totally miserable for a few days, and it was raining all the time. So I just found a big hollow tree, and the hollow was almost the size of a tent. So I just stayed there for a couple of days until I felt better. And it turned out to be sitting on the bottom of a very narrow canyon where all local animals had to walk by. So I saw quite a lot of stuff, including the jaguar.
So you're in a hollow tree with the flu in Mexico, and you saw a black jaguar walk underneath you. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, well, it wasn't underneath because the hollow was on ground level.
So okay. You're actually in the canyon, right? Wow.
But the condition I was in, if I didn't have a camera, I would think it was all hallucination.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a great photo, I have to admit.
We'll have to include that photo in the podcast notes, or maybe in the video. Yeah.
Right. And Vlad, I did, and just there was a report that you wrote. I think it was actually on your website, and you had gone somewhere in Honduras, somewhere in South America, to look for a rare species of mouse, and you trapped it and you found it, and then you bought the land and you put signs up saying, minefield, don't enter. Do you want to tell that story? Yeah,
there is this very rare rodent called Maya mouse.
What was the species name again? I didn't catch.
Maya mouse, Pyramiscus.
A Mayan mouse. Okay, yeah.
And it lives in a very small area in Guatemala. It's the upper edge of the cloud forest, and the area is heavily logged. And the elevation belt is only like 200 meters wide where it can live. And I went there trying to find it among other things, and I couldn't even find any remaining forest that would fit the description. And then I saw this little clump of trees that people were about to cut down, and it looked like perfect habitat. So I talked to the owner, I went to the nearest town, and I bought this place for like symbolic amount of money. And it was so remote that I could visit it again only once. And it was a sad tree because there was a windstorm and there was one huge tree in the middle of this patch. It's a really small patch of land. It's like the size of a big apartment. So the big tree fell and it rolled down and it basically destroyed the whole place. I didn't even sell it. I didn't even bother to sell it back to the owner because it would be like $20 without the trees. But then a few years ago, somebody found a second population on a separate mountain ridge. Everybody thought it was extinct for a while. I mean, the mouse. Then once I went to a cave in Alabama, and it started raining outside, so the entrance was flooded. And I was there for like 30 hours, waiting for the water to come down. And it was totally miserable because it was so cold and wet and so on. But at least this time my girlfriend knew where I was and I had spare flashlights. So it wasn't as bad as it could be. Because it was not the first time I was stuck in a cave, so I followed all safety protocols.
And your girlfriend was that your wife, or was that someone else's?
Oh no, that was a while ago.
A different person. So they were presumably used to these stories and weren't too worried.
Yeah, and then one funny story was in Yakutia, in northeastern Siberia, many years ago. I was hitchhiking in winter. There is this wonderful road called Kolyma Highway. It goes from the city of Yakutsk in the central part of eastern Siberia across very wild mountains to the city of Magadan on the Sea of Okhotsk. It's one of the best road trips in the world, really. So I was hitchhiking there in winter, and I met a bunch of people in a small restaurant who were helicopter pilots. And they said, there is a valley here. When I told them I was looking for animals, they said, yeah, there is this valley not far from here that is totally full of game right now. You really should visit. And we're going to fly over tomorrow so we can drop you there and pick you up on our way back in a week. And there is a little cabin where you can stay. I said, yeah, sure, take me there. And they took me to this little valley and they dropped me near the cabin and they took off. And I walked to the cabin, and when I walked around the cabin, I saw that the wall that I couldn't see before had collapsed. And the wind filled the cabin with packed snow. So I couldn't even get inside. There was really no way to get inside. So I had to walk back to the highway, and about 100 kilometers, which wouldn't be a problem unless but it was the coldest part of Siberia, and the temperature was about -50 centigrade. So I walked and walked. What saved me really is that this area has very little snow. It was just a couple inches of the snow on the ground. So it was very easy to walk. And it was really full of game. There were like snow sheep and whatnot. And it's such a beautiful place in winter because there is almost no snow, but the air is so cold that ice crystals grow on trees. The only tree there is the larch. And by the end of winter, the larches are covered with ice crystals about as long as your fingers. So they look like Christmas trees made of aluminum foil, except they're blue.
Wow.
And it's always sunny and very dry and no wind, and it's such a perfect place.
And how long did it take you to walk back?
20-something hours.
Right. Huh.
I was in very good physical shape. I would probably die now.
20 hours for 100 kilometers. That's
No, 20-something. I don't remember exactly.
yeah. That's
But
amazing.
then, of course, I got to the highway and I had to walk for a few more hours before I got to ride. And there are cabins along the highway, but the first one that I got to had burned down the previous summer. And before I got to the second one, somebody picked me up.
Wow.
And because you've spent a reasonable amount of time up there, I believe in Siberia, have you seen the tigers up in that area?
Yeah. I mentioned one before. There is this little village called Kaimanovka in Ussuri land. They're the office of Ussuri Nature Reserve is. And the first couple of times I visited it, I was still very young, and a friend of mine works there studying hemorrhagic fever, Korean hemorrhagic fever. So he had a little house that I could use. And I found a little forest road just outside the village, which was always plastered with tiger tracks. My theory is that tigers were looking for frogs because the road was always covered with frogs. So there was a little gazebo on the side of the road, and I would stay there, and sometimes a tiger would walk by. And it was always the same subadult male. And then many years after that, I got there for a week in spring, in March. And of course, I went straight to this gazebo and spent a night there. And a huge male tiger walked by, and I looked at the forehead, and I remembered the stripe pattern, and it was the same animal. I'd never seen a tiger so huge. But a year or two ago, I looked at Google Maps, and this whole area had been developed a bit, so it's no longer an option.
Oh,
Pity. Yeah.
yeah. So, Vladimir, obviously you've seen many mammal species. What do you still have on your list? What are some of the top species that you would like to see?
Oh, there's still a lot. I would very much like to see marsupial mole because it's the only mammalian order I haven't seen. I would really like to see saula whale. I would really like to see. There's a lot of stuff, but also,
marsupial mole that's mole found in Australia, correct?
Yeah.
Right, and in the sand, the berries in the sand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would really like to finally discover a new species because I think I deserve it by now, but somehow it never happens.
And you said the other one was you'd like to get a better view of a saula. Is that right?
Yeah.
Saula, yeah, right. And the saula is a medium-sized antelope that was only discovered in the 90s in the forests of Vietnam and Cambodia.
Yeah, I was on 2 expeditions there looking for it. And the first time I found some tracks, and people later put cameras there and got camera trap photo. And that was in 2013, and that was the last photo ever obtained. And the second time I kind of saw one with the thermal scope, and I could see the tips of the horns without the scope, but I never really saw the animal that well. And we put tons of cameras around that location. We found some browse tracks and so on. And we put a lot of camera traps around this location. And we got lots of sirau and muntjac, but no saulas. And the last I saw of that animal was it walking away, and it was kind of felt like it was walking away into extinction, really. Of course, I had no idea we would never be able to photograph it. I thought, perfect, we're going to put some cameras here, and in 2 weeks we'll have photos. But for some reason, it never happened.
There's a piece in the New York Times on those yesterday, actually.
Yeah.
Just saying there, I don't know, some people thinking there's still 100 left, but wasn't George Shallow saying to us, Charles, he thought he thought they were gone, I think, if I remember right.
Yeah, I mean, everyone who we've spoken to about them have been pretty pessimistic.
Well, I'm sure there's no 100, but I don't know. In Vietnam, they basically built a breeding center for them.
They built what, sorry?
A breeding center.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The only reason they cannot find any animals, the only problem.
Right.
But there are still some areas that haven't been explored, and local people still see them once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
That particular place we were in the second time we went there because somebody snared a soul there just before we came.
All right.
I see. And it's a beautiful place. I remember your report. The pictures are just extraordinary. I had no idea that there was habitat like that in that part of the world. This sort of high.
Yeah, there is this conifer tree which is highly prized for aromatic wood, so it's mostly looked out almost everywhere in Vietnam. But in this particular place, there were huge old growth trees like sequoia size. Everybody was impressed to see this.
How many days did it take you to get there from the nearest city?
Oh, just a couple of days hiking.
Okay.
You know, in Vietnam, the rule is you have to be 2 days away from a village to see anything. Because if it's more than 2 days walking, then people cannot get the meat to the market fast enough. So hunting doesn't make that much sense.
Right.
But of course, in Vietnam, there's not many such places.
Yeah.
You've traveled to, you said, over 130 something countries. Is there anywhere left that you have a burning desire to get to for the first time?
Yeah, I have this little list in my head. It's not very long, like 500 places maybe. But right now, if I suddenly had a month, I would go straight to New Guinea, because I've been there for only a weekend, only on the coast. Yeah, the most exciting experience for a biologist is going to a new continent where everything is new. And for me, there's not that many places where I can experience that, but one of them is New Guinea. I've only been there for a weekend, only on the very coast, so I didn't see much. So I'm dying to get there. I'm planning a big expedition a year and a half from now to the Indonesian part.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
How's that happening? Is that like an academic thing or a personal trip?
No, just personal. There are some people who want me to go with them.
Oh, nice. And have you been to Antarctica? That's somewhere I've never talked to you about.
Yeah. I was a guide on a cruise once, and I'm probably going there again next winter.
Okay.
So after that, I will write a combined trip report.
Yeah. I have to say, Vladimir's also got one of the world records for the speed of his trip reports. He normally does them minutes after landing, it feels like. It's very, very impressive.
Well, I write them on the road.
Yeah.
And everything is fresh, you know.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's the best way to do it. Yeah. Well, Vladimir, this has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very, very much. It's great stories.
We look forward to many more trip reports from you on the website.
Oh, I so hope to be able to write them.
Try to stay alive a bit longer.
You will get out of New Jersey one day, Vladimir.
You've been listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and John Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.